Good afternoon. My name is Richard Greenspan. Thank you all for coming. It looks like we have about 10 or 12 people in the audience today. And before I begin, how many of you in the audience are lawyers? How many of you consider yourselves an expert in Word? How many consider yourselves beginners? How many consider yourselves intermediate? How many work for small firms, less than 5 attorneys? How many for super large firms? Okay. All right. That helps me focus my presentation today. My topic is how to maximize the potential of Word in your law office. At the same time, I'm hoping I might be able to give you some tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way. I go back a long way. I started with WordStar. And before that, IBM Selectric typewriters. I typed one of my law school exams with an IBM Selectric typewriter. So let's talk about Word. Are any of you using Word 2016? Nobody. Okay. Last night I tried to look for a joke about Microsoft Word. You know, I checked with Alexa, with Siri, with Google, and even Cortana. No jokes. Then my wife suggested maybe I should come up with a lawyer joke. Most of them were lame, and most of them were disparaging of lawyers. But I did find one that may have some relevance for today. Here it goes. It's a one-liner. Take a hot new technology, give it 5 years to be rendered obsolete, and then lawyers will embrace it. There's a lot of history to word processing that I'm not going to go into. The bottom line, though, is Word is kind of the last man standing. If you have Word, you've invested in a technology that's not obsolete. Indeed, when you think about it, Word is probably the most important tool in your office. That's probably obvious to you. There's a couple of factors that are coming into play today. The first is that despite all the changes in technology and online document creation, legal Zooms and all that kind of thing, which challenges lawyers, lawyers are still creating legal documents. And indeed, some of them have to be typed. So word processing is still a central feature in the law practice, and I don't see that changing. I don't see the court system, for instance, going to another way of submitting legal documents. You still have to type it. It still has to be in the format that the courts accept. You still have contracts that are in certain formats. You still are doing estate planning documents. So word processing, despite the changes in technology, is going to be here for a long time. And I guess you probably knew that. The other thing that I think has happened, and I would love to see a survey on this, I think that, again, despite changes in technology, I think people are typing. I think attorneys are typing a lot more today. In the old days, my tool of choice was dictation. I would dictate stuff. I'd have hundreds of tapes. I'd give it to a secretary, and she would transcribe it in between the telephone calls. It made me much more efficient. It was still tough to get the documents done. But today what I think is happening is because of perhaps economic forces, lawyers are doing a lot more typing, and the people in the office who are support staff, this is a guess of mine. I haven't spent a lot of time. I'd love to know the answer to this. The people in the office have got to bill their time, so they're doing their own typing. So that means Word is even more important today. And being efficient with Word and doing it correctly is important, because the faster you can get your Word documents done, the more work you can push out in your office, the more you can bill. Again, things that I'm sure you guys have, you know, but it just emphasizes the importance of Word. Other products out there. I think Word is the last man standing. Google has come out with a challenge to the Office suite, Microsoft's Office suite, Google Apps. I think it's pushed Microsoft into a direction that enhances collaboration and will give you tools down the road that will make the practice of law better and more efficient. But I don't think you should invest your time in Google Docs at this point, except on a personal level. Most corporations and most law departments and corporations are still using Word. Let me interrupt myself. How many people are using WordPerfect in their office? Nobody. In the old days, WordPerfect was the application of choice. So Word is where it's at, and it meets the needs of attorneys. So one of the things that you need to do in maximizing the benefit of Word is to become a whiz at Word. And one of the things I hope to accomplish today is to point out some things that will help you along the way. I also think you should become aware of where Microsoft is going with Word and the other applications in the Office suite. How many of you are using Office 365? Okay, so it looks like Office 365 has made inroads. I think it's an important development. That's where Microsoft is going. Important features in Office 365, just to get your bearings, is Office 365 comes with Office now, Word 2016, is a desktop app, which means it has to be installed on your computer. And if you don't have that app, you can't get your work done. And more and more frequently, lawyers need to get work done outside the office, where maybe all they have is an iPad. Office 365 includes an online version of Word and the other applications. Right now, it's kind of modest. It's missing a lot of features, but I think Microsoft is going to develop that, which means at some point in time, the kind of features we're going to discuss are going to be in that app, meaning you can log into your Microsoft 365 account and get work done anywhere you are. I talked to an attorney recently who said in a domestic relations case, they went into the courthouse, they reached an agreement, and they sat down and drafted the documents. With Office 365, you also have access to your documents, which is really important. They're online, and they can be online in a number of different document repositories. I personally have Dropbox, Google Drive, and Microsoft's version of this, OneDrive. What happens, as you probably know, and I don't know if you're utilizing this feature, is that your documents are stored online in somebody else's server, and those documents are synchronized to your folders in the office. And again, I don't know how you are setting this up in your office, but you can essentially have a centralized document depository in your office, which replicates to your personal computer and is also online. So if somebody sends you a ransomware phishing expedition and your files get locked up, there's going to be a copy online as a backup. I think that's very important, not only because of security concerns, but also because when you're outside the office, those documents don't have to be on the iPad or the computer or the laptop, or they don't have to be in the Starbucks where you're sitting between court appointments, let's say. They're online. I think that's a very important development. So the final thing that I want to mention is it's a subscription service, Office 365, which means you're paying as you go. I think the days of relying upon a 10-year-old version of Word or of other Office applications is over. Technology is moving too fast. You need the most recent version of the applications, particularly because the integrated parts of the application, the OneDrives, the Dropboxes, they are advancing so quickly that your version of Word needs to be up to date to take advantage of that. So Microsoft is moving into the cloud, following Google, but Microsoft has followed other vendors such as WordPerfect, and ultimately Microsoft wins. So think about Office 365, and one of the things that you might want to consider if you don't feel that you're have maximized your understanding of Office 365, you might consider talking to the people here about further seminars on the use and maximizing Office 365. Okay. How do you become a super advanced user in Office in Word 2016 or whatever version Microsoft has at the time? One of the things that you need to focus on, I think, is to understand the underlying concept of templates in Word. The comments I'm making are in this vein. If you want to become a super user and you don't want Office to, Word to freak out on you and start auto-numbering things in a way that you just don't understand, you sort of have to know how it's put together. Once you know how it's put together, then you can control it, and it won't do crazy things. I realize I don't have a lot of time, but I once wrote a manual, a help manual, which was 365 pages long. They were individual articles, but they were in one document. It was a Word document, which was in a Office help system, and I had thousands of numbered paragraphs. This whole system was based upon Word. One day I came in and I found that all my individually numbered articles had renumbered themselves from 1 to 1050 because of the way that numbered paragraphs work. It's a very difficult area in Word. It's something you kind of want to focus on if you want to become an expert user. And the reason I'm saying this is if you're going to do your work quickly and efficiently, which is kind of the message here, you got to know how it works under the hood. I don't think we're going to be able to tell you everything today, but I'm hoping to highlight the areas that are important, and then maybe you guys can circle back, and maybe we can schedule some webinars, some cheat sheets, some materials or something that'll help you in these areas. And one thing I think it would be great is to kind of know where people feel they have weakness so that we can focus on it. There's not a lot of ways to get Word education out there. It's usually not for people in law offices. Word does everything from desktop publishing to newspaper columns to formatting books, not to mention legal documents. So knowing out of those thousands of features what's important as a lawyer, and I'm sure you know a lot of this, that's another way of becoming expert and maximizing the potential of Word. So templates. Word uses a system template to create every blank document. That template has a group of styles in it, which affects the formatting in that document. So when you create a new template, a new document, you are actually replicating something called the normal .m. It's a system file. It's buried somewhere on your computer that you probably can't get to, and you can't change it very easily. And even if that system file gets corrupted, you can go in and change it, but if it becomes corrupted, Microsoft replicates it. It creates a new one, and you got to start all over again. So what you need to do is to create new templates for your documents. And I'm advocating that you not take an existing document right away and create a new template. I'm advocating that you create a template for each type of document. Pleadings, estate planning documents, contracts, and then copy and paste into those documents after you formatted them the way you want the kind of text that you're going to use. All of you use templates, right? What you're really doing is when you use a template, you're taking an old document and you're copying it, and that's your template. That's the way people get their work done. It's about the most efficient you can be unless you have an automated word automation product like Hot Docs. But a lot of these documents came from WordPerfect. WordPerfect had all these formatting codes in it. Or they came from people who didn't know how to use styles correctly. And if you copy them, you're kind of going to run into trouble down the road. So you should create templates that have the correct styles in them, the correct layout as a blank document, then create your document using those styles and that layout, and if you want, you can make new templates out of them. So for instance, if you do a set of interrogatories that becomes kind of your standard interrogatories, make a template for those interrogatories. Not just a copy of an old document, but a template. That way you're sure that when you create the new document, the formatting is correct. The paragraph numbering is correct. You're using, as I advocate in my materials here, you're using a table for the caption. You're not going tab, 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 return, and spending like hours trying to figure out how to do a caption when you could use a table, if you know how to use a table. Move your documents to the cloud. That's really beyond the scope of this conversation. You probably need to spend some time optimizing where you put your documents so that they're accessible to people in your firm. You can share templates on a network, and that you're actually sharing them in the cloud. You put your templates in a centralized repository. They show up in everybody's office in Word 2016, and you just click the template button and start a new document. Eventually, with Office 365, you're going to be able to utilize collaborative tools. Okay? I'm not going to cover these things today. There's just too much complexity. But I think the day will come when people will be able to collaborate in real time on documents. This goes beyond creating documents. This has to do with, for instance, the kind of scenario you may encounter. I worked for ALM for a few years, which is a corporation, and we would have to do a proposal or something, and then we'd email the document to 5 different people, and then they would update those documents and send it to everybody. So you'd have 5 versions of the document. Lawyers collaborate on documents with opposing counsel. In the old days, I would get a document for the other attorney, and I'd draft a long letter telling him or her, there weren't as many hers in those days, what changes I wanted to make. They were very long letters. I mean, at least you now can put them into an email, but in those days you drafted a letter. Now you can, if the other attorney knows how to do it, you can use track changes. The other person can make the changes that they want. Yours are in red, theirs are in blue, and then you can sit down in front of the document and you can decide on what you want to change. Theoretically, that's a very efficient way of handling that task. Microsoft has now introduced the notion of real-time collaboration. It's really not developed well, but it's something you should keep your eye on again. Because your documents are in the cloud, you can share the document with another attorney, and both of you can theoretically, it doesn't work that well, work on the same document at the same time. I have to brag a little here. I wasn't going to include this, but I can't resist. Several years ago, my nephew came to me, and he said, he just graduated from MIT. He's the smartest kid in the entire family. He said, I'm working on something. We're working on real-time collaboration. Now, he's a programmer. So he had developed an idea being able to have several people working on the same piece of code. So they were coding, 3 people could be working on it. You'd see each person was adding code to the page in the program. And I said, that's something lawyers could really use. But you don't have any formatting. Until you've got formatting, it's not going to work. You got to be able to boldface and underline, and you got to be able to put in paragraph numbers. And he said, that's a good idea. Maybe we'll put in some formatting. So I said to myself, sounds like a great idea. What's going to happen? About a year later, I found out that he had sold his company for $20 million to Google. And Google had incorporated that real-time technology into Google Docs. So you probably haven't used it before, but you can use that technology to collaborate in real time. Just recently, Microsoft has announced that they're going to have real-time collaboration. It doesn't work very well. You kind of can't see what the other attorney is doing very well. But just imagine the day when both of you are working on an online version of Word, which doesn't quite exist yet, with track changes. And you're both making changes in the document. His or her is in blue, yours are in red. And you're both looking at it at the same time, and you're on Skype talking to each other and looking at this document. And you're negotiating the document in real time and just deciding what to do. I think there's a great potential there, particularly I can see all kinds of applications. So I see that as where Word is going, and I think you should be there, and the only way you're going to be there is to consider Office 365 subscriptions, which will update Word and all those capabilities. The iPhone is only 10 years old. Look what has happened in 10 years. Google is enhancing its platform, and Microsoft is running to catch up. So that's where I see part of the future going. I'm now going to talk about templates. I kind of want you to understand the substructure of templates. And incidentally, I spent some time in the materials that you have taking a pleading, focusing on the features that you need to understand to do a pleading the way I've come to use them, and I don't know if it's the best way. And then going into an explanation of how to do it. That's the sort of thing I'd love to do in person. I don't think we're going to have enough time, so I think you'll get a lot out of it if you can spend the time. How do you create a pleading where the caption uses tables, where the numbered paragraphs use styles for numbered paragraphs, where the standard template underlying it has been modified so the formatting is the formatting that they use. If you can master that document, I think it'll bring you a long way towards mastering Word. When you start a blank document, do you all know where the blank documents are, right? I don't have to go into that. I'm sure there's some people who may not. When you create a blank document, the style, which affects the text that you put on the screen, is called the normal style. So if you just start typing a letter, it's in the normal style. For whatever reason, Microsoft decided that you wanted to use Calibri font, 11 points, 1.08 lines rather than single space, with 8 points between paragraphs. Go figure. I don't know why they did that. So one of the first things that you want to do is to figure out what fonts you want to use for each class of document. There's like 3 or 4 that lawyers have used. In the old days, it was Courier. Then it was Times New Roman. Then it was Arial. Not Calibri, which I think Microsoft invented. So the first thing that you want to do in your template is change the normal style the way you want to use it. The reason you want to do that is because if you just format a paragraph the way you want it, sometime in the drafting you're going to end up typing a paragraph before what you typed or after what you typed, and it's going to use the normal style that exists. And you're going to end up with Calibri right in the middle of your document. The other reason you want to use the normal style is the way it works. The normal style is a paragraph style. And I wish I had time to go into a lot of detail, but that is a paragraph style. There's 2 or 3 kinds of styles. One kind of style affects text. So you have a style called strong, which is basically bold-facing document text. Most of them are paragraph styles. And what happens with a paragraph style is when you use the style to type a paragraph and then hit return, it replicates itself in the next paragraph. Okay? It just automatically carries forward in the next paragraph all the formatting that you put in. If you type, and it also means that if you change your mind in the middle of the document and you decide that you screwed up the font, or that you don't want to have 8 points after each paragraph, or you want to indent the first paragraph a half an inch, it means that instead of going through 100 paragraphs, you go to your style, modify your style, and every paragraph will automatically change. I realize I'm beating this to death, but it's a pretty important concept, and then in the long run, it'll save you huge amounts of time. In a letter, you want a style that's single-spaced, maybe has half an inch indent, maybe has 8 points after it, and maybe it's in Arial or Times New Roman. In a pleading, you're essentially dealing with double spacing, except in the caption, in the signature line, and in the certificate of service. So one way to deal with that is to have a normal style, which is Times New Roman, single space, no spaces between paragraphs, and then create a new style, double space. Okay? And when you need to switch to double space, you use the double space style, and when you're in the portion of the document that's single space, you use that. If you use the normal the normal style, you're going to find that every time, if you go in your signature lines where the attorney's name, bar number, whatever you call it in your state, address, email, you're going to find that every time you hit a carriage return, it's going to put 8 points between it. Right? And then you're going to have to go back and change that. If you have a style defined as single style with no line spacing, you'll just use that style when you get to that point. Okay? Most styles in Word are based on the normal style. So once you've set the normal style the way you want it, and you create a new style, more than likely it's going to be based on the normal style. So you take the normal style, which is single spaced, and I'd love to be able to show you, in detail. Maybe we'll get a chance to do a little bit of that. You format the text the way you want it. You take double space paragraph, you select it, you change it to single space, and then you create a new style, and the style will look just like you formatted it, and you name it, and it will appear in the style gallery. So the reason I'm saying you should do individual templates for each type of document is because the styles you define for each instance they're going to be just a little bit different. For letters, you can kind of use the normal style and maybe change it to Arial, if that's what you use, or Times New Roman. 8 points between paragraphs isn't so bad. But for pleadings, you're going to have to change it. So you just don't want to take a WordPerfect document somebody used 10 years ago, make that your template, and you find out that Word created 150 different styles, and it makes a mishmash of your document. The next step is, after you've created your base style, your blank document for a pleading and your blank document for a letter, then you can start thinking about copying text into it, creating templates on that, and then using them in the future. You'll have to make a decision. You can't make a template out of every kind of document, but there's some documents you use over and over again. You're doing that all the time. You're copying a document, and then you're using a find and replace maybe to change the names of the parties. You're going over the caption and putting in new parties. You kind of want the formatting to be correct when you do that, or all kinds of things could happen that will screw you up. I have a friend who works for the largest, what used to be the largest firm in Connecticut, and I asked him, how are you doing your documents? He says, well, I go to my email, and I type it, I email it to my secretary, and then she formats it for me. And I said, well, what happens if you're working on a document and that's been formatted and it does something weird? I give it to her and she fixes it. 9 times out of 10, the problems you have with the formatting is because styles weren't used consistently throughout the document. It takes some discipline to do it, but every paragraph should be a style that you've identified or created or updated. Okay. All right, I kind of covered that under understanding word styles. Let's see if I can play around with this. Here's a document. You have that document in your materials. It's at the end of the treatise. And I've decided that I'm going to make it single space instead of double space. There it is. Now I have a style that looks just like my double space style. And I can, probably don't even have to highlight it. I can create a new style. Create style is in the style gallery. It's kind of buried. You have to click on this drop-down list here. It's kind of the only way you can get to it. There are others, but you hit create, and that style, and then you name it, and that style is going to have the formatting of that paragraph. That's how you create a style. It's going to automatically put it into the style gallery, and if you need to take it out of the style gallery, you right-click. Everybody know how to right-click? Okay. And you say remove from style gallery.
We don't have that on
You're not
your slide.
your
Okay.
demonstration here.
All right,
It looks
sorry,
like
guys.
Your PowerPoint is still on showing your PowerPoint slide.
All right. I'm sorry. We're going to run out of time. So we click the drop-down button. We said create style. We name the style. You could call it normal single or normal double, depending on which way you go. In a letter, you might have normal be the single space version. And if you needed double spacing, you create a style for double. Once you create the style, it goes on. If you do it this way, which is kind of the shortcut way, it's going to appear in the gallery. If you right-click on the style in the gallery, and you say remove from style gallery, it won't be there. I had you in the materials create 9 paragraph styles, because paragraph styles are for paragraph numbering. There are 9 levels, but you're only going to use 3. probably. When a paragraph that starts with a 1, a paragraph that starts with an A, a paragraph that starts with a small Roman numeral I. So by right-clicking on these different styles, you can keep them out of the gallery, and that means that as you're typing and you decide you want to change your style, you just click on the style in the gallery. Now let me see what, okay.
Need to go from current slide. Great.
Okay. Since we're running out of time, I think what I'd like to do at this point is give you some hints, tips and tricks on Word, the kinds of things that are necessary. I'm just going to have to outline them. You know that this is called the ribbon at the top. The ribbon is divided into tabs. And on each tab, there are certain features that you need to know. There are certain tabs that you can safely ignore most of the time. Mailings, you can references, you can ignore for most of your work. But the most important one is the Home tab. All your font features are here. The way Microsoft organizes it, the ones that you use most of the time are up here on the dialog that you can see. At the bottom of most of them, there's kind of like a More button. It's a drop-down button. You click on it, and all the features dealing with that topic are there. So if you need to do something exotic, that's how you get to it. Same with paragraph. Anytime you have a paragraph and you need to do things, you have control over your indentation. You have control over the spaces before and after. Most of these features are facing you on the Home tab, but if you need to dig in, this is where you go. When you type text, another version of the same thing pops up. And if you get used to it, it can save you some time. So if I can boldface this text, italicize it, underline it. I can do it up here. And I can also go to the font dialog box and do the same thing. So there's at least 3 different ways to do things. Remember, right-click. If you can't find something in Word, in the context that you are, right-click, and chances are what you need is going to be right there. One thing I wanted to show you, because it's something that has bugged me for years, when you do a document, particularly a pleading, and I go into this in the materials, your pleadings aren't numbered on page 1. They start with page 2, right? You know, I hope you guys know how to do it. This particular feature is buried in most of the most recent versions of Word. The only way you can get to it is to go to the Layout tab, click the drop-down More button, and go to the Layout tab in that dialog. This is the page setup dialog, and on the third one, Layout, it says Different First Page. What that means is you can have a header. You can put nothing in the footer, which is what you used for page numbering. And then you can go to your footers by double-clicking at the bottom of the screen and go to the second page and start your page numbering on the second page. Leave it off the first page. So the first page doesn't have any numbering on it. You start your numbering on the second page. Different first page. You can use the same feature to create your own stationary headings, your own letterhead. You go to you create a letter with a different first page. You put your stationary heading at the top in that header. You put on the header on the second page the addressee, the date, and the page number. And that's how you handle the second page of a letter, if you guys are still writing letters. I'm not sure. Does anybody write letters? So you create a different first page, which means it has its own footer and its own header. And then starting on the second page, there's a different header and the footer. You put your page numbering in the second page footer, and that's how you get your numbering. There's also, I can see I'm getting in the weeds here. This is going to take a long time. I've gone into all of these types of features in my outline. I think the important thing to remember is you've got to find a way to figure out which features in Word are important to your law practice, and then you have to dig in on those features. I've tried to do that for pleadings. If we had more time, we could do it. We could hone in on each one of those paragraphs. I actually have an outline here. I had hopes that we might get into it, where I basically made a list of each feature that you should probably know. There are some other hints and tips that I could give you. You all know using control key combinations to do certain things. Control C to copy, Control B, boldface, Control U, underline. My recommendation here is that you select the text first, and then you can just hold your Control key down and hit those keys. There are a lot of additional features that I could, tell you about, and I'd love to tell you about if we had another opportunity. And I would suggest that if we want to have further discussions on these topics, I think it would be a great idea if we could figure out, focus our training on individual features for, particular things. Like, what do you need to know to do a letter? What do you need to know to... And I think that in that way, you would identify the features in Word that are important to a law office. You need maybe 100 different features in Word out of the 10,000 or so that are there, and I think then you would be able to enhance your ability to use Word and maximize the potential of Word in your law office.
Excellent. Well, what I'd love to do is open it up, especially the people in the audience first, because there's definitely our promise that we're going to open it up for your questions. So we definitely have some people, and we'll get to the ones who have already messaged in. But for the people who have joined us live, does anyone have any specific questions that they'd like to ask at this time? Please.
Word defaults with watermarks to putting the watermark only on the first page. Would you use the same trick about the different first page that you just discussed?
What do you want to do? Have it continue on additional pages?
And I have to repeat this just so everyone can hear, so I'm going to repeat what she just said. She asked a question with regards to watermarks in Word, that it defaults to only pasting on the first page. And so we're asking what she would like to do with the watermark.
You want the watermark to repeat on different pages. I think usually what you do is you tell the, let's see. I think I'm going to have to punt for now, but I would be happy, I think on some of these more advanced questions, I think the best way for us to handle it is to give you, I'd be happy to give you a response, and we'll post the response. I think I know how to do it, but I don't want to stand up here bumbling around looking for the features.
Yeah, so it's under design, and also always think whenever you click on the customization tab or preferences or additional options that they'll pop up. So if you go into your design and you select your watermark, then you're going to have the different options of the pages that you can go into. So all the questions too, we can follow up with a post of specific instructions step by step of how to do it. But if you click on your design and then you scroll down under your watermark tab to your custom watermark, it's going to give you a more advanced setting to be able to do that. Other questions from the in-person audience? Let me get into these questions. The first one and the two most recent ones are actually questions. I'm not sure if we have time to get into these because they're questions with regards to utilizing the security features on our cloud services. So Arian has said, do you have any comments or thoughts regarding the adequacy of security features of the online cloud services you're advocating using?
Here's my feeling is this. Everything is going to the cloud. Everything is going to the cloud. The kind of security that Microsoft and Amazon and Google have in the cloud is way better than the security that you have in your own office. It would be a lot easier for someone to hack into your office and steal your documents than to hack into a Microsoft cloud or a Google cloud or an Amazon cloud and get your documents. You need to be careful with passwords, and Microsoft is going to make you create passwords that will kill you, but they're doing that for your own good. So you don't put in password 1 or the birth dates of your children or things like that. So I think the security ultimately is going to be better in the cloud. Remember, it's just another computer you're hooking up to. And I think the security will be better, and already is better.
Depending on who you choose, make sure that you read their privacy policy so you can get a little bit more information. You want to set up your two-factor authentication so you make sure that you have that additional level of security, and choose the paid option. Do not be putting your free, utilizing the free accounts necessarily when you can have the paid option. It's going to give you another layer of security. The next one we have is from James, and he asked, how do you edit Word documents via Dropbox if you're offline?
When you're offline, in Dropbox and the other types of services replicate, you're actually, you can go in both directions, but you're usually creating your documents on your computer and replicating it in the cloud. So you would have to have access to your file folders where you are. And you're going to have real-time synchronization. So there's going to be a version in the cloud and then a version on your computer. And that's really the only way you're going to be able to edit those documents when you're offline. Then when you connect up, the version on your computer synchronizes to the cloud. So if you don't have access to the internet, you can't do anything. If you have the documents on your laptop or your iPad, you can edit them on that machine, and then they'll automatically synchronize into the cloud.
How do you keep footnotes together on a page?
Does anybody want to have an answer? I think I'm going to have to kick that down the road too.
Okay, and what's the best way to create and format tables of authority and tables of contents in a legal brief?
The best way? I'm not sure what that question means. It's probably another one where we should I could have a whole seminar on tables of authorities and table of contents, and I intentionally left it out of this. Most of the material I wanted to cover, we didn't have time for today anyway.
Yeah, so we can get you some information on those as well. And so if we don't have any other questions from the audience, we can remote over if we have any other questions, comments before we change over presenters, and we can get you additional information. And definitely look through the materials that he's provided today. They're excellent. They're incredibly helpful. They're going to provide you a lot of walkthrough step-by-steps for a lot of the questions that you might not have been able to ask at this point. Any other questions? All right, well, please help me in thanking him for joining us for this
Thank you.
incredibly informative presentation. And now let's see if I'm capable of hitting the magic buttons and transferring us over.